Okay, hello everybody. Sorry to be a little bit late here. Uh, Long story that I'll talk about in a second, but let's give it about a minute or two for some more people to filter in. Okay, how we doing, everybody? Long story. I posted an announcement a couple minutes ago saying I was running late, and probably some of you are saying, "What? How do you run late from like going upstairs to downstairs in your own house?" So I can't remember which of my classes I've told this to or not, but back in March, my wife and I bugged out to Indiana to live with my mother-in-law um, for a whole host of reasons I'm not going to get into. But she lives out in rural Indiana, and we had some storms the other night, and apparently that affected the internet. So we didn't have internet, and now I am in the lovely confines of my wife's friend's house who has internet. So, long story short, uh, that's what was going on this morning. But we are ready and raring to go. Um, let me throw up a chat message super quick for people coming in a little bit late. This is also a way for you, to kind of know if you're coming in late. This is what we're going to talk about, and for me to remember to like tell you stuff. Okay, so couple sort of housekeeping things. Um, First off, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Uh, so uh, right off the bat, be aware that is being recorded. So if you're shirtless, you maybe want to put a shirt on or something. But more importantly, if you do come in late to class or you can't be here for some reason, these will get posted on my YouTube page. I uploaded one of my classes yesterday, and it took no kidding, like 12 hours to actually upload the video. So it's not going to be that immediate. I'll try to get them done by the end of the week, for the preceding week. But if you want to review lecture, I don't know why you'd want to listen to another hour and a half of me, but it'll be up there. Um, but let's start with some announcements. Just kind of reviewing some things I posted on Bright Space the other day. Um, So yesterday, last night, I think, um, somebody pointed out that the point breakdown in the syllabus was incorrect. I think what I had done was uh, uh, calculate your grade based on the number of assignments we had, and um, put that into your grade book correctly, but I didn't change it in my syllabus. So this is the revised correct point breakdown. We have 1,200 points total. Same number of exams, discussions, quizzes, whatever. Basically, just my numbers were wrong. So this is the revised point breakdown. I've updated that in the syllabus, and the new syllabus got posted under content. Other big announcement, textbook update and assignment things. So I've had a couple of you in this class, I've had a couple in my other world history class telling me that you bought an ebook but haven't gotten a link to the book or any kind of information about accessing the ebook. So I called the bookstore. Here's what I know. You should, once you've bought an e-textbook, should have access to that in Brightspace. I'm not a student, so I don't know what sections you guys have, but there should be a section, something like My Bookshelf, which is where your any kind of e-textbook you've bought is located. If you ordered the book from the bookstore, but you still haven't gotten that, you can go to the campus bookstore, get a refund on the ebook, and then purchase a rental textbook for the semester, a physical copy of the book. Apparently, they're having some IT issues with, I think, the publisher, which is something that's a lot out of their hands. They're working on fixing the problem, but it's not a bookstore issue; it's a book publisher issue. But kind of some related things. If you're trying to get a hold of the bookstore, just really generally, don't try to call them. I had a student who was on hold for 2 hours yesterday. Don't do that. Email them at bookstore@pstcc.edu. All of their employees have access to that email, and they reply pretty quickly. That's going to be your best way to get a hold of them. So with this in mind, with the fact that there's textbook problems, many of you, I'm assuming, have gotten an ebook and don't have the book yet. Rather than expect you to complete an assignment that you might not have the book for, I'm going to push back the due dates for the first quiz and the first discussion. So both of them are now due on Sunday, September 13th at midnight. So due date change on that. Note that all the other due dates are going to stay the same. This doesn't affect quizzes 2 through 5 or discussions 2 through 5 or your midterm or your final. It is just these first two assignments. Okay, that was a whole lot of information. Questions about the textbook, questions about the assignment change, any of that? Has anybody had problems with their textbook, or do you have access to your book now, your ebook?
I just still have the paper copy.
Okay.
Right. So
well, that's good.
Yeah.
But again, if you're still have problems with the ebook, that is hopefully getting fixed. And in the meantime, we're pushing back those first two assignments. Other announcements. I think that's it, actually. I just uploaded the PowerPoint we're using today. Again, we had a mess of a morning, and I would have had it up earlier, but it's up as of like 5 minutes ago. I feel like there was something else I was going to need to tell. So for the sake of kind of organization in class, rather than having you all chime in and then I've got like 3 people that want to talk and then I don't know how to do that to kind of be democratic about it, you all should have a function that lets you raise your hand, and that sends me a notification that you've raised your hand. So as far as I know, because again, I'm not a student, I don't know how the kind of function works. Right now, Rowan is raising his hand, so that's awesome. He knows how to do it. But you should be able to go under, I believe, participants, the very kind of bottom of your video screen, and there should be an option to raise your hand, to, I think, ask a question. There's a couple other things. Rowan, can you maybe chime in and tell me if I'm right or wrong about that?
Well, I'm on the computer, so I know it'll be different for people with a mobile device. But just clicking, trying to do the menu or right click on participants doesn't do anything. You actually have to open up the participants list, and then at the bottom there's invite, mute me, and raise hand, and that's what I use.
Okay. Okay. Well, cool. So let's try to stick with that. And, I'll do the best I can to check the chat. If you have a question, throw it out there. And of course, the raising hands thing. So let's, what else? Is there anything else I need to talk about? Let me just, Brianna, I think, has her hand up.
Yeah, just real fast on the mobile device. If you're on there like me, it's different at the bottom. Just hit the 3 little dots that say more, and it'll be right there. I just wanted to let y'all know.
Cool. Hey, thanks. Okay, so boy, my head's all over the place this morning. Oh, well, yeah, like, what's my agenda? What do I need to talk about? Oh, yeah, how are you guys doing? We've had our first week. I've thrown a whole bunch of syllabus kind of stuff at you. I won't answer like specific questions about specific assignments or something, or like if you have trouble reading a document, now is not the time to ask that kind of thing. But are there questions about class policies, assignments, basically anything we covered last week?
So for the, I still need to submit the letter of understanding. So
Yes.
you said that we could just do that. How did you say that we could do that electronically? Very
good question. So you've got a couple of options here. You can print off the statement of understanding, sign it, and either scan it into your computer or take a picture on your phone. So those are two options. Third one, pull up the document itself, type your name in. That'll count as signature as well. And then to actually submit the assignment, do not email it to me. And I don't mean this to you specifically, Dylan, but everybody, do not email it to me, because I'm going to get a million bazillion emails and I'm going to lose them all. What you need to do to submit the statement of understanding, the bonus assignment, is go up to assignments up here. And there's a submission page for your statement of understanding. It's the only thing that's there. You'll upload a file through somewhere in this link that's not showing up for me. So you'll upload it through the assignments tab or section here. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Other questions? Anybody else have questions? Okay, cool. So today we are going to jump into our first chapter. And in a class like this, we're kind of like diving in the midst of world history, right? This isn't early world history where we kind of have like the beginning of the beginning. We're kind of, I mean, arguably we're picking an arbitrary point to start. Roughly 1400 is the time period or the beginning year we're looking at. But what we are looking at a little more broadly is this kind of smashing together of 4 or 5 different cultures or 4 or 5 different regions of the world. So the beginning of this lecture and this chapter is looking at those societies in isolation, in a certain amount of isolation, and then bringing them together towards the end of the chapter, and then kind of tracking that mixing of cultures later in the next 2 or 3 chapters. So Contact Commerce Colonies is sort of the title of the theme, I guess, which we'll track a little bit through this lecture. But we're going to start with European exploration, kind of the how and the whys of it. Then we'll move on to the Columbian Exchange, what that is, which is really the event we're talking about. And we'll kind of define that a little bit later. We'll look at changes in Europe and specifically the Protestant Reformation. And then we'll branch out a little further and look at China and the rest of the world. So one other thing to kind of keep in mind here, if you've taken a US history class, those classes tend to follow pretty well a set timeline and progress pretty naturally because you're only looking at really one country. In a world history class, especially the way your book is structured, we tend to jump around a lot. So we might not talk about, we're not going to talk about every country, every chapter, right? Or every region in every chapter. Most of the time, I'm trying to tease out some kind of theme in a chapter or a couple of chapters. So be aware that we are going to be hopping around the globe quite a bit each week. But let's start with Europe. And really, Europe kind of on the brink of exploring places other than Europe. So if we backtrack a teeny tiny smidge, if we go back to the 1200s, 1300s, we're looking at medieval Europe. Medieval Europe is a pretty isolated geographic region. It is, it's not to say that medieval Europe has no contact with the outside world, but it's limited for a lot of reasons. It's also dealing with a massive worldwide pandemic with the bubonic plague. So coming out of that, 100 years or so after, around 1400, we see a Europe that is more interested in trade and expansion outside of Europe. But the question kind of is why? It's not like somebody woke up on January 1st, 1400 and said, oh, we're going to start looking around in other places. So the three main motivators we can look at are access to silk in China and India, access to gold in parts of Africa and India, and spices in China, India, and Africa. That's primarily what Europe is motivated by during this age of exploration. So how do we get that stuff? Well, again, this isn't like in a complete vacuum and just all of a sudden it happens in 1400. Europeans had access to this stuff before 1400, largely through a set of trading networks called the Silk Roads. And I see that Mo has his hand raised. What's up, Mo?
Yeah. You said silk, gold, and what else?
Silk, gold, and spices.
Spices. Okay. Great.
And I'm going to circle back to this slide here in a second. So Europeans had access to this silk, gold, and spices before 1400, but often they had to use a series of trade routes called the Silk Roads. These were interconnected trade routes connecting China and India and sort of the Middle East and Europe. So if I wanted to get a silk bow tie from China pre-1400, I had to pay like 5 or 6 people to cart that bow tie from China, from coastal China, maybe down through the Indian Ocean and then up into Europe, or maybe just over land across this huge landmass in China, India, Persia, and then to Europe. So all of that takes a long time, right? And is really expensive. I got to pay a lot of people, a lot of man hours, and it'll take months and months or maybe, a year to get that product. I see that Rowan has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say also that the Silk Road was not the most stable, considering it went through places like the Middle East, and in many ways, the Middle East of today is just as bad as the Middle East and unstable as the Middle East has been in previously. And so this trade route was very, if I recall, was very long, very expensive, and at times very dangerous. And if China shut down for whatever reason, which, you know, they do every so often, get a new dynasty in there, then that kind of shuts down the whole road.
Okay.
As
So super quick. I'm getting a couple people in the chat saying they don't have the PowerPoint showing up. Are we all not seeing the PowerPoint?
Correct. We
I'm
haven't.
not seeing it.
Okay.
No, you
It
know.
was just your brat space screen we seen for a while.
Let me see again. If this helps. Better? Seeing a PowerPoint? Anybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you guys weren't seeing this. Did you not see a PowerPoint at all, period?
No, sir.
Okay.
It
that
was
sucks.
still on the statement of understanding page in Brightspace.
Okay. That's
I
weird.
thought you was
Okay.
just doing like an introduction.
Okay. Well, no, I had a whole thing going. So, hey, picture and bullet points, and this is still where we're at. Okay. So, So what Rowan was saying, the kind of stability of the Silk Road is not consistent. We're not talking about like, Interstate 75, right? We're talking about a guy that knows a guy that knows a guy who can get you something. So the kind of access existed, but not nearly as consistently as we're going to see.
Wasn't a big part of it also the fact that it went through Ottoman territory and the Ottomans like put a lot of taxes on European goods and stuff going through their territory?
They did, and let's be clear here. One of the big themes of this class is kind of looking at world history as human history, right? And it's hard for me too to not say like, well, I'm of European descent, so I'm most familiar with European history. But that, you might say, well, it's hard to get stuff through the Ottoman Empire because they taxed everything. But yeah, that's a great, brilliant business strategy to make a crap ton of money. And so, short answer, yes. Longer kind of thing to think about is not to think of it as kind of a comparative situation. And again, I struggle with this too. We'll kind of bring up this idea of Eurocentrism in a little bit.
Well, I wasn't being like Eurocentric at all about it.
No.
I know how progressive the Ottoman Empire was for that time period. I was just like saying that they did tax Europeans as they were coming through a lot.
Oh yeah, for sure. I guess I'm kind of thinking, I'm probably just thinking ahead to what we're going to talk about in like a half an hour.
I would
But
count
anyway,
the element of progressiveness with the Janissaries and how they got them.
I know what you're saying, and rather than kind of muddling up something that I want to say this. I know what you're referring to, Rowan. We are going to talk about the Janissaries in a little bit, I think next week. And so kind of hold that thought till we get to it. So if if Europeans had knowledge of or some amount of access to stuff along the Silk Roads, that really is kind of the motivator for the kind of exploration impulse we're going to see in the 1500s. Let me go back to my PowerPoint here. Or in the 1400s, rather. So if the Silk Road took forever and wasn't always reliable, or had 8 people involved that you all had to pay, or a crap ton of taxes, a lot of the kind of impulse for exploration for access to silk or gold or spices is how do we get that stuff quickly and cheaply? And that's something we really need to keep in mind, especially into our next chapter when we start talking about colonies. Almost every European country is motivated to create a colony, or, well, we could say explore a place, not out of some kind of Star Trek mission statement to boldly go where no man has gone before. It's how do we get this stuff that's really expensive that we can make a lot of money off of? How do we get that quickly and cheaply? So to do that, if you're trying to sail from Italy to China, you can't just like hope that you're going to be able to do that, right? You need to have some amount of infrastructure built to allow you to sail a longer distance. So I'm not going to get into ancient navigation a ton, but to kind of briefly introduce this idea, obviously sailing existed before 1400, right? But it was less a science and more of an art to navigating. Most kind of pre-1400 ship navigation, actual ships themselves, were pretty small. Now, this is one example of one type of ship, a Norse longship, that could hold a crew of less than 100. It's not very nimble, right? This thing turns like a boat. It has one big giant sail. It could go pretty long distances, but this isn't something that you can carry a lot of cargo on, or necessarily a lot of people. It's not necessarily designed for the kind of really long distance, multi-month, maybe a full year kind of sailing we're going to talk about. So you need better ships, first off, and largely the Portuguese will kind of corner the market in shipbuilding, in navigation knowledge, and really are kind of the innovators in this early age of European exploration. So a lot of the kind of credit for this technology and this knowledge and this the benefits the Portuguese get go to their leader, Henry the Navigator, Henry the Second. He is not the guy who is going on a ship, because of course he's royalty, but he will put a lot of resources, money, kind of investment in knowledge building, really more than anything, behind this kind of desire to build better ships and know more about geography than any other country. So Henry the Navigator will standardize the study of map making, for instance. He will create several university level schools to study geography and map making. Shipbuilding technology and navigation technology will be a closely guarded secret in Portugal, to the extent that if you sold a Portuguese map outside of Portugal, if you sold it to somebody in Germany or France or something, you could be executed for committing a high crime, essentially. So there's a lot of emphasis put on how do we make better ships? How do we know more about geography or sailing to kind of have that advantage against our European rivals? So a couple of the kind of innovations in ship making that the Portuguese have will be the creation of larger ships, the building of larger ships. So here we have an example of a Portuguese designed carrack. You would be most familiar with this as the Santa Maria. This is a rebuild replica of the Santa Maria. One of Columbus's ships was a Portuguese designed ship. Um, a ship like this is pretty big. It has a hull length of 62 feet. So to put that in some perspective, that's about two NFL regulation size football fields in length. It would have a crew of about 50 to 60 people. And this ship has some other differences. So let's kind of open this up to you all. What is different from this ship? What is different about this ship than the Norse longship that we saw?
It's more bulky.
It's more bulky.
And there's sails.
Sorry, say that again.
And there's multiple sails.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different sails that you can turn in different directions to an extent, or raise or lower. What kind of advantage does that give you?
You can turn easier.
Yeah, right. You can turn a little bit easier. You can also go faster or slower. If you have more sails up, you're going to catch more wind and go a little faster. If you have down, you'll go slower. And then there were a couple people with hands up that I think I missed.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Rowan?
Yeah. There's, if you look at it, the longboat was sort of open and exposed, but this, you can see that, like, in the you can see how there are, even on the surface, there are multiple layers. Like, there's the front part that goes upwards. I bet there were rooms there, and there are rooms in the back, and then you had the hold. You could be sheltered from the elements, and you had a lot more space in that was protected, that you could store people or goods in.
Yeah.
Great for longer journeys, because I mean, if you look at the North Longboat, you'd be out in the elements for months, and all of your food would be out in the elements and water for months too.
Yeah, so there's more space and more storage for stuff if you're going for silk or gold or spices, and storage for people and supplies, meaning that this is designed to sail for longer periods of time. And then I saw Nick had his hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to that. It looks like they have more levels. You could actually sleep inside undercover instead of being out in the elements, and same things that he had said, cover your items and whatnot.
Actually, medieval ships many times are older ships. I don't know if it's still true today, but older ships, only the captains and the like highest ranking officers got like cabins. Otherwise, the crew would just have to sit out on the deck in these hammocks, makeshift hammocks. And that's how they would sleep. There were very few like rooms and beds in these ships, no matter how big. And they always went to the highest ranking officers.
That is true, for sure, Josie. But you know, I think generally I think you're all touching on the kind of points I'm hopefully leading you to. These can go longer distances. They can travel faster, or at least in kind of different types of speed. So this is a different kind of ship, right, than what we might have seen 100 or 200 years before this. So the Portuguese have an advantage here with the carrack. Another Portuguese designed ship is the caravel. Y'all seeing this, hopefully?
Yes.
Okay.
At least I am.
Okay. So the caravel is a little bit smaller. It's a 50-foot deck length ship, so a teeny bit smaller than the carrack. It would have had a crew of about 24, but this is a lot more maneuverable. It is, think of it like the sports car of sailing ships. Both the Nina and the Pinta were caravel designed ships that Columbus used. But again, the same kind of features as we'd see in the carrack. You've got multiple sails, you've got more storage space. It's a ship designed to go a longer distance and have a pretty substantial crew. And then we have Mike's hand is up.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So these three different ships were these were these all made by like the Portuguese? Like were they the pioneers for making ships?
Yes. So think of it like, maybe the arms race during the Cold War, if you're familiar with that. The Portuguese are the first to build these kinds of ships, but within a generation, almost every other country will have this kind of technology as well. But the Portuguese get this kind of jump start that other countries don't have. And then we've got Nick.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing. It looked as if they got a little ahead of the game on these newer ships to build them higher off the water. They were taking on too much water maybe with the previous ships, and they were like, hey, we need to make our fronts and the back a little higher and the ship overall to keep water from coming aboard.
Yeah, right. You're gonna have probably some problems on a Norse longship like this with water coming out of the ship. Not as much in these bigger ships for sure. But again, all of this kind of comes back to now the Portuguese have the kind of physical capability to sail a long distance, right? They're not in this teeny little long ship or little coastal like flat bottom ship or something. Cool. So that's kind of the first puzzle piece, right? The Portuguese will also benefit from knowledge, both kind of geographic and I guess you'd say weather related. The Portuguese were not only putting resources into cartography, map design, but they also studied wind patterns and ocean currents as a way of predicting basically where they would be or could be in order to navigate better. Very specifically, what I'm going to highlight here is something the Portuguese call the Volta de Mar. Translated from Portuguese, that means turning of the sea. And what it is knowledge of how wind patterns and ocean currents work around the European coast. Okay. Well, some of you are saying, oh my God, I didn't take this class to learn about the Weather Channel. But here's why this is really important. Let's look at a map. I'm a visual kind of guy, so I like maps a lot of times. This is part of that Volta de Mar knowledge that they have. So let me see if I can do something fancy-pantsy with this. I might be able to bring up a pointer or something like that. Okay, you can see my cursor. 1 second, you guys. This is on the fly trying to figure something out here. Let's see. Pen. Okay, maybe I can draw on this. Hey, okay, are you seeing a mark up in the top left corner?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. So this kind of knowledge of wind patterns and ocean currents is really, really critically important because before you knew about this, if you didn't know anything about ocean patterns or wind currents, and let's say you wanted to go from Lagos up here all the way down to Arguin, down on kind of the eastern coast of Africa here. You obviously sailed from Lagos. See if I can't get a different color here. Ooh, highlighter? Sorry, I'm new to all of this. This is all cool to me. Okay, so let's say you want to go to from Lagos all the way down the coast. You definitely want to stay close to the coastline here. Why on earth would you be so perilously close to the coastline? Why is that so important? Anybody know?
It's your frame of reference for when you're trying. If you get so far out that you can't see land, then you're really lost.
Yeah, you don't know which way is north, south, east, west. generally speaking. So staying close to land is really important. You need to know like how to kind of trace your way back. And that's essentially what sailors would do. If you got all the way down to Arguin, before Volta de Mar and all that was common knowledge, you had to do what was called tacking into the wind. So you do this kind of zigzag pattern to get pushed out a little ways, and then you turn your ship and you go back towards the coastline. And then you turn your ship out and then go back towards the coastline. You just keep doing that until you get all the way back up to where you started. That takes forever, right? But with this knowledge of ocean patterns and wind currents now, Portuguese sailors could say, well, no, we can just sail right down the coastline and then counterintuitively, totally crazy speak sounding, we can sail away from the coastline and keep sailing and keep sailing. And we know that if we just get to this point, we'll get blown back towards the coast. And that not only is predictable, so it's going to happen every time during certain parts of the year, that makes your trip a lot less cumbersome. You don't have to do this kind of zigzaggy tacking pattern that takes a couple of weeks to get back up to Lagos. You can just follow these ocean currents and wind patterns. So that's another piece of this puzzle, is knowing the kind of reliable, predictable way that the ocean or the winds might push you in certain directions. So the Portuguese have a couple of really huge advantages, right? They have ships that can sail a pretty long distance. They have maps that are more accurate than most countries have at the time, that can kind of show you where you're going. And they have knowledge of these wind patterns and ocean currents to get back home safely. But again, to just sort of re-emphasize this, all of this is based on a desire for a faster route to the places where we can get expensive stuff. So very specifically, the Portuguese wanted access to what they called the Orient or the East. So it's this really broad, vague term for China and India. So how do we get there faster? Well, we need big ships to do that. How do we know where we're going? Well, we make maps of some of the areas around Europe and into Asia. Well, how do we know we're going to get back? Well, we study the wind patterns and the ocean currents to be able to navigate back home. So all of this, again, are these puzzle pieces leading Portugal to really dominate the kind of technology arms race in the 15th century. And next, I want to talk about kind of the benefactors of this. But I'm gonna pause here for a second and say, are there questions? I know I just threw a lot of information all at once. I'll re-explain some of these terms we talked about if you want that. If you just have questions or comments, now's the time.
I have two things.
Yeah.
First, I thought apparently I was logged into a separate Zoom meeting for your class at the beginning of class, and I didn't realize that till about 25 after. So okay. I may have missed roll. Second of all, I'm sorry, I can't remember. Is there a way for me to like raise my hand while keeping my video off?
Yes, there should be an option, I believe, under participants for you to choose to raise your hand, but I think maybe Dylan is going to. Okay. Dylan has his hand up, maybe, and can help.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Maybe I'm trying to kind of understand more about what the Volta de Mar is.
Yeah.
I may have heard you say it, but it just kind of flew right over my head because it's early. But
sure.
Yeah.
Well, so let me go back to Josie real quick. So Josie, there should be an option at I believe the bottom of your screen that's you'll see an icon called participants. Yeah. That should bring up some options to raise your hand, I think. Okay.
Yeah, I see now. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah.
10 o'clock.
Okay. So Dylan, Volta de Mar literally translates to mean turning of the sea.
Okay.
But what it is this knowledge is that the Portuguese have, and they're really the only country that has this kind of monopoly on this knowledge. It's knowledge of ocean patterns and wind currents in the Atlantic Ocean. So the map that I was drawing on, this one, is part of that Volta de Mar knowledge.
Okay.
They knew about ocean patterns and wind currents sort of south of this as well, but this was kind of the best way I could highlight the idea.
Right. But you were saying that Portugal current right there, when they're talking about all of this, as far as like trade routes and ways for them to actually get back, they were just basically trying this out. They were blind when they were doing this almost. Or did they have navigational experts that were like, hey, we know that this is where the current is?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
They had a vague understanding that there were these currents and these kind of reliable ways of getting pushed in certain directions, but they might not have known exactly sort of, where you were going to get pushed southwest and then where you'd get pushed northeast. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Mike Morgado has his hand up.
I had a question. So, so this is like the beginning of, I guess, these European early countries kind of traveling out to other lands and trying to find stuff. What's like the time frame, or like when did they like switch from trying to find different lands and trying to find resources to trying to colonialize other countries?
Good question. So if you want like a starting point for this lecture for where we are right now, 1400. And that's, if I give you any kind of vague time frame like that, it's going to be plus or minus a couple decades, because not every country does the same thing at the same time. But the kind of transition from pure exploration to colony building, we're not there yet. When we will get into colony building probably 1480, 1490, 1500. So it's about 100 years or maybe one generation of this kind of stuff, where European nations are just saying, well, what's out there? What is the quickest route to a place? And like, can we do this thing?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, great.
Hey, can you take us back through the PowerPoint, please? The first slides.
Sure. So a couple things I didn't talk about were sounding poles and celestial navigation. I'm not going to talk about that or expect you to know about it. One thing to keep in mind, just because we do have kind of a limited amount of time, is that this is up on Brightspace. So if you want to download the PowerPoint, it'll always be there. But
so if you want to download the PowerPoint, it'll always be there
okay.
on Google Play Music, but it either isn't available.
Thanks, Google, for interrupting. It was trying to help me find my PowerPoint, apparently. Anyway, so this is up on Brightspace, and I'm not going to just kind of keep these on screen because you can get to them. But if there's like a specific slide you need to know, I'm willing to kind of keep it on that. But let me jump back to here. And let's kind of take a couple steps ahead in our time frame. So if, the Portuguese were developing this technology with shipbuilding, with navigation knowledge, some of the kind of benefactors of this are not just Portuguese, because inevitably this knowledge filters out, gets out beyond the borders of Portugal. So if we're talking about European exploration, what name would probably come to your mind immediately as a European explorer?
Christopher Columbus.
Christopher Columbus. Good, thank you. And maybe you were like peeking ahead on the PowerPoint. Yeah, so Christopher Columbus, right? Let's take a minute and talk about him. Let's use him as kind of a case study of, European exploration, what their goals were, and what I really do want to look at is what is Columbus interested in. So I have a couple slides here about Vasco da Gama. I'm not going to talk about da Gama. I'm not going to expect you to know about da Gama. But so Christopher Columbus. Let's start with just right from the outset. What do you know about Christopher Columbus? What did he do? Why is he important?
He set foot on the North American continent.
Set foot on the North American continent. Rowan, you have your hand up.
Well, he wasn't the first European to actually get there. He was the one that went back and made knowledge of it widespread. I recall it's outside of our time period, but the Vikings did manage to get there. But they all died. So, and by this time period, they had stopped. People, or at least Europeans, had stopped. The colonies they had in Greenland had been abandoned. But by Europeans anyway. I think some of the Native Americans moved over there. But he made it widespread, thinking that it was part of the Orient.
Yes,
which is why he called the natives Indians.
Yes, so there's a couple of other people with their hands up. Josie.
I have a question. It's conflicting to what the textbook said and what you've been saying, but I've had multiple classes over this topic of Christopher Columbus, and it's well documented. I thought that he wrote back to his patrons, Queen Isabel and her husband, I forget his name, that there was tons and tons of gold and silver that the Native Americans had. But apparently, I thought, and from what I've learned in the past, that was a lie or a far-fetched truth. And that's what I was told. I'm hearing from all these, in your class, the textbook and some of this, that's not true, and there really was a lot of gold. And I'm just trying to I'm confused on which one to believe.
Okay. Well, that is a good kind of starting point here. So what did happen? You all have a lot of kind of disparate, scattered around knowledge. Here's Columbus's story. Let's start with who he is, and I'm going to explain like what did he do. Okay, so Columbus is an Italian business person, a merchant. He imported and exported stuff into Italy. But Christopher Columbus isn't his actual name. His Italian name is Cristobal Colombo, but that was too Italian sounding. He wanted a more Latinized, kind of less Italian sounding name, so he adopted this name of Christopher Columbus later in his life. But he believed through his own study, through the knowledge that he had and other Europeans had, that you could get to Asia and the Orient. So again, those are really vague terms for basically China and India. That you could get to Asia and the Orient not by having to sail all the way around the southern tip of Africa, like Da Gama eventually does, not by having to go all through these land routes like the Silk Roads or through the Indian Ocean. He says, no, we can get to the Orient, to China or India, not by doing all that jazz, but by sailing west, just going from, let's say Lisbon here on the coast. If you just keep sailing west and west and west, eventually you're going to smack into China. So he, again, is not just this kind of kook spouting this idea. He owned hundreds of reliable maps, at least as reliable as you could get in the late 1400s, and had studied the known geography that existed. So he goes to a couple of countries and says, hey, if you give me a bunch of money, I will sail west. I'll go and get spices or silk or whatever valuable thing you want, like 3 times more quickly than you would otherwise. So he goes to the Italian government and they say, well, we don't really have enough money to just like give you a couple $100,000. We're going to have to pass. Next, he goes to the German government and they say, no, we don't really have the money. Then he goes to the Spanish government, and they are the ones that will be his patrons. They will be the ones that front a bunch of money. They'll also give him 3 of their worst ships that are kind of falling apart. He has to repair all 3 of them. And say, yeah, knock yourself out, right? If you happen to actually survive, because we don't know what's going to happen if you go all the way west. If you happen to survive and you come back, then you got a bunch of valuable stuff for us. And that's a win for us. But if you die and you get eaten by like a sea monster, oh, well, we didn't spend a lot of money. We gave you our worst ships. You know, we're not at much of a loss. So that's kind of his plan. I'm going to sail west. That's going to be a faster route to Asia and these exotic things that we want, that we can make a lot of money off of. Okay, I think somebody had their hand up. Rowan?
You said Italian government and German government, but they weren't unified at all.
No, I realized what I was saying about Germany and Italy. He goes to a kingdom in Germany, or what eventually becomes Germany, and a kingdom in Italy, or what eventually becomes Italy. Okay, so that's kind of his pitch, right? If you think of him as like an infomercial dude selling you a sham wow, that's basically what he's doing. Like, give me some money, and you'll have this wonderful product. So in August of 1492, he's commissioned by his patrons in Spain to find a trade route going west towards the Orient. In October, he actually, in September, he leaves Spain. Let me go back to this map. No, this map. He leaves Spain, sails down to the Canary Islands to basically resupply himself, and then west towards what he think will be China and India. In October of 1492, he lands on an island in the Bahamas that he believes to be one of the so-called Spice Islands of India. At the time, Europeans believed that India was this collection of islands, and there were different spices that grew on different parts of those islands. So he thought he was on one of those islands. So he makes landfall. He kind of marches off his ship. He says, I'm claiming this land for Spain. I am in India. Take me to all of your wonderful spices and things. And he's, of course, nowhere near India or China. He's in the Caribbean. Columbus meets a couple of the native people there. He gets back onto his ship, sails around for another week or 2, hits another island that is likely the island of Cuba, that he will name Hispaniola and claim that for Spain. But he believes that he is now in China, gets off his ship, says, I've come to China, show me all this amazing silk that you have, and spends a little bit longer time on this island. He's eventually forced to leave after about 3 weeks because he gets caught up in this dispute between one tribal group and another one. On his way out, a couple of his men are injured. He takes with him a couple of native people and this really tall kind of bamboo-like plant, what eventually we know to be sugarcane. Takes some of that with him, sails back to Spain, and is welcomed as this hero. This person who had sailed to India and China in like half the time that it takes everybody else. And Columbus goes to his deathbed believing he had been in China and India. In the ensuing years, he is sent back several more times and really doesn't get anywhere close to North America. I guess the closest he gets is to some of these islands a little bit off the coast of Florida, right? So he never makes it to North America. He does not set foot anywhere in North America. He doesn't find gold. He doesn't really find any of the spices he was looking for. He steals a couple native people, transmits a couple of diseases from Europe to the Americas, and goes back. So most of what we all, what you all kind of knew or assumed or kind of said is, either a falsehood or kind of a half-true kind of understanding. And what, the bigger sense here, the kind of general public might think about Columbus is completely wrong. He doesn't discover America or North America. But he does kind of open that door to other countries saying, well, if there's these islands here, then maybe there's something else here. Okay, so I want to continue a discussion about Columbus here in a second, but I see at least one hand up. Josie.
I've always wondered. I've known for years now that it was about 20 years after Columbus's death that they realized the Americas were not China and Italy. But I've never been able to get a straight answer out of any of my teachers about the fact of how did they discover that?
That the Americas were not China and India?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to give you an educated guess here and say that it's this kind of baby step process where countries will say, okay, there's these islands that Columbus found, and then there's more land north of that, which would be Florida, and then there's more land north of that, so this is a bigger land mass. But I don't think there's a year. There isn't a specific 1500, 1510 when every country knew that North America was North America. So I'm sorry I don't have a good answer or a definitive answer.
That's fine. It isn't I've looked it up online too, and I've struggled to find a straight answer.
Yeah, and I mean,
from a credible source at least.
I will say that that's kind of the nature of so much in any history class, world history especially. There's not just okay, on this specific date, this thing happened, and every country everywhere knew about it. It is this kind of gradual building of a knowledge base. Dylan has his hand up, I think.
Yeah, I just read somewhere, I don't even remember where, but there was this, I guess he was a historian, either that or he was a theorist, that was talking about how when Columbus discovered the Indies, and he discovered all of that land, he confused the people, the native people, as an Indian nation. And that's why, as far as when they say Native Americans, they prefer that term a little bit more because Indian was used as a misconception.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the history behind that, or was there, is that more of, just kind of a thing that they did in their culture as far as
No, you're right. So in this class, a little more broadly, I'll probably almost always say Native people or Native Americans, and it's not some kind of hippy dippy thing. It's that Indian is really not that accurate because, like you said, Columbus comes to these islands and says, well, I'm in India, you're Indian people. And that term just becomes this sort of de facto for Native people in the Americas, at least.
I'm sorry. Were there any type of were there spices there that they could trade, or was it more of just, oh, okay, well, the ground here is fertile for colonization? Because I thought that the whole thing with Columbus coming over to, just anywhere at first, I thought that it was, just a thing of, oh, well, there's all this free land that we could colonize, and there's all this free land that we can use for trade, but I didn't know if it was just mainly spices or what it was.
Well, I think we'll answer that question here.
Okay.
In a minute or two. But here's a good kind of jumping off point, though. you know, in any of my history classes, you know, terminology is important, right? So saying colonization, you know, that's the word, you know, and I don't mean you specifically, Dylan, but any of you. That's the word, you know, I've got a 2-year-old daughter, so we're constantly telling her, like, use the words you know to describe something, and that's what you're doing, right? But colonization doesn't always mean the same thing in the same time period, or even in the same in different countries. But I think I'm going to answer your question here in a minute,
Okay.
Dylan. And we'll do that by jumping back in here. So what I want to focus on here next, related to Columbus, is what he is interested in. So we know that he doesn't make it to North America. We know he doesn't make it anywhere close to China or India, but he is at least kind of aware that he's maybe not in those places. He doesn't come out and say it. He doesn't say it to those in Spain, but he seems to have this inkling that, okay, maybe I'm not in India and China. I'm probably close to it. So what does he find valuable about these places? That's what I really want to dig into next. And here is where you all get to participate a little bit more. What I like to do in almost every class session, at least once a week, is get you to read a document, right? Because we're going to be doing that a lot for graded assignments. And this gives you a little bit of practice at really even just like getting used to reading something that's 200, 300, 400 years old. So I want to try to understand what Columbus is interested in, and by extension, what Spain is interested in, by reading parts of Columbus's diary, because he kept very, very extensive journals during all of his voyages. So what you're going to see up here in this slide and the next one are 2 excerpts from his diaries, both describing the same island, what he calls Fernandina. This is probably an island somewhere in the Caribbean. We're not really sure where it was. But what I want to do is read this. So I'm going to ask one of you to read this out loud. And then we'll kind of tease out, what is Columbus interested in? What is, you know, he's going to this island that nobody's ever seen before, that he's never been to. So what surprises him? What does he describe? You know, that sort of thing. But let's first just get somebody who's willing to read this.
I'm willing.
Josie, I think?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
The island is green, level and fertile to a high degree, and I doubt not that grain is sowed and, sorry, it's cut off a bit, just a sec. Okay, sowed and reaped the whole year round. I saw many trees, and such a diversity was among them that it was the greatest wonder in the world to behold. One branch of a tree bore leaves like those of a cane, another branch of the same tree, leaves of a different kind. In this manner, a single tree bears 5 or 6 different kinds.
Okay, thank you, Josie. So let's start out with, what is Columbus describing? I don't need you to go into excruciating detail, but what are some of just like first blush thinking about this? What are some of the things he's talking about? What interests him? I don't want like underlying motivation or any of that yet. What is he just describing? What are the cool things he's seeing on this island?
Just basically the plant life, you know, as far as like, he's talking about how fertile the ground is, as far as he can harvest, or he feels like they harvest crops year round, and the trees are like what he's never seen before. And it's just, I don't know what he means by 5 or 6 different kinds. Does he mean like 5 or 6 different kinds of fruit, or like not brand of tree, but like breed of tree?
We'll touch on that in a second. So he's describing the land. He's describing trees. Anthony, did you have your hand up? Anthony Bluffington?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Okay, so we've got trees, we've got land. What else? Anything else? Rowan?
Yeah, he very clearly is talking about how fertile and productive and nice this place is. I mean, he says level and fertile to a high degree. I doubt not that grain is sowed and reaped the whole year round. I don't think they did that there, but tangent. And saw many trees. Such a diversity was among them. That was the greatest wonder in the world to behold. It's like he's talking about how nice it is compared to, well, from my knowledge of Spain especially, it can be quite rugged and not the most fertile and kind of dry. And then he's talking about this place where it's all nice and flat, and the weather is nice, and it's really fertile.
Yeah. So
also the fact it says whole year round. So while in Spain they may only be able to grow grain for a season or two, instead you can double or quadruple the amount of time you have to grow grain or any type of plants.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's important.
Nick, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm going to take it to maybe a little bit of a darker side. I think he sees dollar signs. He sees an opportunity to take advantage of a land that is so prosperous and diverse vegetation. And he would like to be able to, he knows that their lands is a different terrain and they may be able to go there and maybe not just dollar signs, but trade. You know, he sees an advantageous situation for him and maybe the local people.
Yeah, for sure. So think of it like this. Has anybody been to Florida before?
Yes.
I was born in Florida.
I'm from Florida.
My experiences with it's got overdeveloped coast and horrible hot swamp.
Okay, so somebody who's spent like a good amount of time, who said they were born in Florida?
I lived there from when I was born to about a year ago.
Okay, so Jordan, what is Florida like compared to East Tennessee?
Well, the soil there, if you're talking about that or just in general, the weather?
The weather, the geography, how does it compare to East Tennessee?
Well, for the most part, it's really flat. Unless you live in a specific part, like where I'm from, Central Florida, it's very hilly. Everywhere else is super flat. And it's like walking through water because it's so humid all the time. And I don't know why it's called the Sunshine State, because it's sunny like one day a week maybe, but the rest of it's just pouring rain.
Mm-hmm. What are the temperatures like?
Constantly hot.
Yeah, right.
Like in even in the winter, it's like, low 70s is like the best you're gonna get a lot of times. And then, sorry.
No, good.
Just gonna say in the summers it's like high 90s to low 100.
Yeah. So my wife's grandmother lives in Fort Myers, so I've been there a couple of times. It's hot. It's obviously tropical. There's green stuff absolutely everywhere, which also includes mold. And it's, like the polar opposite almost to East Tennessee. It's completely flat, or most of it's flat. And that's kind of what Columbus is saying. I mean, he's not talking about, my grandmother-in-law's retirement community, but he's saying this is completely geographically different than Spain. Stuff grows year-round. It's completely flat. It's very fertile. He talks about how there's trees that have leaves from all these different kinds of plants. And somebody had asked, like, is he talking about different trees, or is he talking about stuff on one tree that grows different ways? He's not very clear, and I'm not very clear about what exactly he's describing. but he's really describing an otherworldly kind of place, something that he's never seen in Italy or Spain or parts of Europe. But then he goes a little further here. We've got another passage I want to look at, and then we'll kind of circle back to the bigger picture idea here. Could somebody read this passage for us?
I can.
Go for it.
Nor is the sun by grafting. These trees grow wild, and the natives take no care about them.
Oh, I'm sorry. I realize I just took us out of the screen share. Okay. You should be able to see it.
They have no religion, and I believe that they would very readily become Christians.
Okay. Thank you. So real quick, I'm just realizing what time it is. We are or should be at the end of a class session at 10:30, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to leave it here. Josie, thank you for reading that. We'll pick up next week here with the Columbus Diary, but super quick. Give me like 2 more seconds of your attention. So I think we're making relatively decent progress lecture-wise. Let me see how next week goes, where we are in lecture. I might think about adding some time on Tuesdays, but let me kind of cross that bridge when we get to it. For next week, we're picking up a lecture here. We're still going to be in chapter 12. But just a kind of heads up here on Monday, that is a federal and a state recognized holiday. It's Labor Day. So if you have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, they shouldn't be meeting. If you have stuff to do on campus, I don't think campus facilities, certain facilities will be open. Just kind of a heads up about that. I'm sorry for running a little bit over, but Garrett, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just had a real quick question about a certain day.
Uh-huh.
Is the college open on Tuesday, November 3rd, which is election day?
Should be, yes, as far as I know.
Okay.
So we're going to stop here. Thank you for bearing with me here a little bit. I have office hours at noon if you want to pop in there with questions or anything. But we'll pick up here later next week. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.
That last bit of the journal we read will make a lot of sense when we hear about the Reconquista.
Yeah, we'll cover that a little bit later next week, I think. Have a good one, guys.
Bye.
All right, thank you.